All right, we're back on the drag car.
Talk to the shift guy. On it.
It could be the operator. So today we're going to get the transmission out, start taking a look at the clutch. I feel like one of the discs on the clutch are welded, and there's something going on with the transmission. Now, I drove it in here fine. It's sad, it seems like the clutch mostly freed up, but I suspect that it's probably one of the discs is pretty torn up. So we're gonna pull the transmission, take a look at the clutch, and then we'll start pulling the transmission apart itself to look at what's going on inside that thing, so we can get this thing ready to race and try to get some good passes down the track this year. We're not trying to build the car like we were last year and get it to the track. The car's built, we're gonna refine it and start hopefully getting some good passes. It's still winter here. So we've got lots of time, but time starts disappearing as spring rolls around. So let's get to taking the transmission out. All right, transmission's out, and see what we got into here. We made a brace. I think you can kind of see that. So that we can do this at the track. I need to modify it, make it smaller. I'm going to make it a little bit stronger as well, but it doesn't need to go this with the car down on the ground, with the tires we transported with, this still clears. However, I'd like to make it a little bit shorter, so that if we're at the track and we have to pull the transmission and let's say it's broken and it's not going back together, that this brace will be low enough that we'll be able to get the car in and out of the trailer without having to mess with it. So we could transport it basically without a transmission in it. So this is first rendition. We're going to make some changes to it. But with that said, we found one of the issues with the clutch setup. So with this, we have extra bolts, extra holes drilled into the crank to get more bolt clamping force on the flywheel to the crank. And these bolts need to be ground down. And as the clutch wore and got hot, whatever, one of the rivets, I'll show you in a second, hooked this bolt. So that's what was causing the clutch to hang up. It didn't cause any damage to the clutch itself. Everything looks pretty normal in here. However, you can see one of the rivets got wiped. But the rest of the discs look pretty good all in all. So that's one problem resolved, but now we got to get this apart to see what's going on inside of it. Again, it did drive in here, but at the track, it wasn't sounding super great, so we got to deal with that. All right, now that we know what's wrong with the clutch, it's time to get into the transmission and see what's wrong. So there's a couple things that I experienced at the last event. One, as you will see, Clayton can add the clip in. I launched the car and only one wheel spun and drove the car hard to the left. That tells me that there's something going on with the differential. I think at the end of the track when that happened, when I was turning off the end of the track to come back on pit lane, I heard a clunk basically, and I believe that was the differential freeing itself back up, because when we did all the checking and everything, once we got back to the pits, everything checked out to be fine, which is why we tried to make one more pass. That last pass, when we tried to make that pass, that's when I had problems with the clutch. So either something in the input shaft or something is moved The differential definitely has been compromised, I would say, so we got to take that out. I do have a spare. We'll send that one back to get rebuilt. But I also want to check on the gears, because I believe in that pass as well, I had a hard time in 4th gear. It wouldn't go into 4, something like that. So there's a handful of things going on with this thing. We'll get the fluid drained out of it and start tearing it apart. I'll set up the time lapse and bring it on board once I get it apart. All right, now that this is apart and I can see what's actually taken place here, and it kind of explains everything that's happened. You can see we've kind of been digging in that already, but a little bit of filings in there, and 4th gear dogs are basically chewed up, and that's what that is. And what likely has happened is bits of that, I'm trying to show you the slider as well, bits of that would have likely got inside the differential and is what caused it to lock up momentarily. So when I got to the end of the track and it felt like it freed up, that's likely what's happened. So some debris has gone through this. So I've already spoke to Gary at Pelican. We're sending this one back to get just a once over to make sure everything's good on it. I do have another one here that I'm going to put in. I'm probably going to try to get this repaired, and at the same time I'm going to order an extra 4th gear and extra slider as well when I order another set of gears as a backup. So that's kind of what explains everything that's happened with the transmission and the clutch. The clutch, obviously, the rivet hit the bolts on the flywheel, caused that part of it to grab at one point. Then the differential was its own separate thing that's happened because of the gear. So we found all the problems. It sucks, but it is what it is. It's part of racing. So if I had to guess what's happened with this thing, when we switched on my old chassis, when we switched turbos, we started having really crappy short track, not being able to figure it out. Then I switched to a whole new chassis, and this has been a whole new thing trying to figure out. But what I think's happened is all the short track stuff and having botched runs and not being all in it the whole way down the track has left me sort of lollygagging and shifting, not like I should be. When you have one of these transmissions, or one of these gear sets more specifically, not the transmission, dog gear set, they really want to be shifted really hard to work properly. And I can tell you, and you could probably see old footage, is that I'm just not shifting like I should be, because I know the run has already been basically ruined from the short track. So I think most of that is just me not doing what I should be doing, or, well, whether one, being shifting properly, or just letting out and letting the car go down the track, using the clutch and just shifting kind of like an old lady, opposed to half-assing it, basically. So that's something learned for this year. Obviously, I'm going to get a new gear set underway, and we're going to get this one repaired or replaced, whatever I decide to do with the pieces. And I'll just have to mental note this down the road when we get down the track. If we have something go wrong in the short track, either stay in it to win it, or just kind of let out and don't mediocre shift these things. So lesson learned. It's a race car. There's always things that are going to be happening. You're always going to be learning. Just like this, we had no idea really what happened at the beginning, and then you start getting into it and figuring out what's taking place. So the transmission is apart. We're going to send a few pieces off to either we're going to get this rebuilt as mentioned, looked over, and then I'll figure out what I'll do with the spare 4th gear and slider. So this is going to sit on hiatus for a little bit until I get those pieces back. We'll move it out of the way, and we got some other things that we're going to do to it for this year. I want to change up some of the coolant stuff. Coolant pressure was higher than what I would like it to be, and it's not because of boost, because really we didn't do anything great at the track, and that's where I noticed it. One thing that I changed from the old setup, I wish I could show you. So I'll show you the 16 valve cylinder head, much like a 1AT, would have a flange off the side of the head like this. I had also divided the stock flange to have 2 lines coming out the side of the head, and it had one in the front as well. And on the new setup, I had deleted this front. We just plated it off, and thinking that all would be good, but because the cone pressure is a little bit higher than I'd like, and just in regards to temperature and all that stuff, we're going to put this one back on. So I'm going to basically make a plate with an AN fitting, a -16, and we'll have a -16 line coming off the front of the cylinder head as well, which should really help, because now that I look at this, having this line and these 2 lines compared to what I had is pretty substantial. So we're going to modify, build a flange and basically add another line into it. So yeah, 16 valve cylinder head for all the young peeps that spend their time on 1ATs. This was the holy grail before the 1AT came around. Well, I guess in the VR. I shouldn't knock the VR. Before the VR came around. Okay, now that this thing's on the ground, there's a few other things I wanted to go over that we're working on, in the middle of working on. We have a whole bunch of new tools and stuff coming. It's going to be a lot of cool stuff happening in the next probably 2 months or so. But one thing that we're working on, which we'll show you guys that later. One thing that we're working on though, this hose, it's really big, and so she said, and we're going to try to get, it weighs like 10 pounds in total. We're going to try to get this to come out, maybe invent out the where the mirror used to be. So that will take a lot of weight out of that. So then the breather essentially will come out of here. It's just a concept. We're thinking about trying to do that. One other thing that we're working on, which probably add some footage in over this. I've been hard at work designing a valve cover for this engine. So obviously these used to have a hump here. You can still sort of see that here. They don't come with, they don't run 2-liter coil packs. They don't have breathers. So the catch can stuff you'll see in older videos where it's puking lots of oil into the catch can. I'm going to try to, I'm basically redesigned a complete valve cover, and Clayton's probably playing some of that over this now, that we'll have machined out to be hopefully everything that we need for looking nicer. This thing is super, super heavy as well, so that will help get rid of a little bit of weight, because this is an original valve cover that we added a full plate of aluminum on top of to try to build its own breather. So we're going to hopefully have a billet valve cover on this that I designed from scratch, which is kind of interesting because I'm new to the whole 3D modeling world. Some other stuff that we're going to mess around with, we're changing up the slipper this year as well. So we're going to change out that slipper for a different slipper. And what else am I thinking about? I'm probably, as I mentioned, we're trying to get a little bit of weight out of this. I may swap out the battery. That battery is really, really heavy. And as you can see, well, maybe you can't, but the obviously the car's on the ground now, and it has that brace in there supporting the engine up in place without the transmission. So it's doing exactly what I was hoping. But yeah, we're going to try to focus on designing a few new parts for this thing. And we got lots of cool tools and everything coming. In fact, there's one new set of stuff that's arrived today. But yeah, we got some work to do on trying to lighten the car a little bit more. I did pick up a carbon fiber hood. It's not really specific for this. It's a Golf version, and obviously I have a Jetta. I'm looking up because the car's still up on the hoist. I have a Jetta front end on this, so the hood's kind of damaged and scratched up and stuff like that, and the clear's flaking off. It's not really damaged, but the clear's flaking off it. It needs to be redone. So I'm thinking about modifying the heck out of that thing to see if I can get a carbon fiber hood on this thing. It will all be painted. The car's going to look exactly the same. I'm not about that carbon fiber look. I'd rather it to be painted anyway, so we might modify that. We have a few things in regards to the catch can and stuff for the lines that we're going to work on. Try to get, again, a little bit more weight out of the car. I'm going to try to get a little more weight out of myself. That's probably the hardest thing to do. And get ready for the season. So we got lots to do. Hopefully this video wasn't too boring, basically pulling a transmission out of a car and showing you some carnage, but it's time to work on the drag car, where you'll see more updates of this thing as we progress with it and get into the season. If you guys have any questions or comments about that car or any of the other cars, this one here is from South Carolina. That one back there is from Chicago. You guys would have seen that one already. And then we just got this one fired up. The video's probably already been out for this, but this one's running on Cyvex. So lots going on. I've talked about it in other videos, but thanks for all the support. We'll see you in the next video.